then we wonder, because one of the basic change that was the last, my fourfold point, one of the basic changes that we see from the globalist era to the current era, the very current era, is the fact that for the globalists, the idea was this encasing and basically betting on legislation and the legislative power that was going to smooth capital. What we seem to have on steroid like never before is the executive privilege. Right? So you have the destruction of the administrative state, that's the project of Project 2025, the destruction of the regulatory state, and the politicization of the state. And which means that basically executive privilege reigns supreme. So Trump is not the first one. It started with Reagan, Dick Cheney. There's even a film about that, Vice, which is all about that, the unitary executive theory. But it's pushed to an extent that never existed before. So the question is, what is the purpose? And that's where your paradox comes back again. I mean, it's executive privilege in the name of a future decentralization, in a way. Yes, and nonetheless, there's an extra thing there, which is the fact that the cronies who seem to be on top for the moment, Musk in particular, but not only, seem to have a slightly different fantasy, which is no longer to have their own private zone in the state, but why not have the entire state in a way, or to make the state into their slush fund?
Yeah, no, and I think you can have both. So I think that, you know, for Peter Thiel, indeed, the arc of my book, The Crack Up Capitalism, begins with Thiel saying in 2009, the only way to do politics now is to exit, imagining a kind of a world of many thousands of polities instead of just about 200 countries. So the idea of a kind of endless movement between jurisdictions based on what you wanted, what you needed out of them, and so on. By 2016, only 7 years later, he's speaking at the Republican National Convention and seems indeed to have concluded that it's easier to take over an existing state than to go off and create your own. So I think there is that aspect to it. And the old-fashioned military-industrial complex is indeed being realized as a kind of tech-industrial complex, as Biden suggested in his farewell address. But I think also that to stop at that vision of state capture as the kind of endpoint of their politics is not going far enough if you want to understand even their own thought processes. That if you take seriously which I think we have to now, the effort to completely sort of decapitate and defang the administrative state and to reduce it to a few privileges or obligations, including, you know, writing the checks for Palantir and Anduril and SpaceX. In other words, you know, filling the contracts with this small number of, you know, very highly specialized tech services. Then you have to see that there's a step after state capture, which is maybe something more like state exit. And for Musk, that means, on the one hand, going vertical, going to the stars, but also more short-term, it means going inside and producing processes of internal secession and breakup. And I think that is very consistent with the writings, for example, of someone who I've long felt was exaggerated in his influence, but I'm now starting to feel like maybe was properly estimated in his influence, and that's Curtis Yarvin, who was blogging for years under the name Mencius Moldbug. Just got a big profile in the New York Times a few weeks ago. And he spoke of something that he called neo-cameralism or neo-reaction, which was kind of based on some principles which look pretty familiar if you are looking at the operations of the Silicon Valley right at the moment. The first was what he called RAGE, which was retire all government employees. So he felt like a newly elected government should immediately retire all government employees. And in fact, that's literally what Elon Musk tried to do recently when he sent an email identical to the one he sent to his Twitter employees saying, if you want to retire, send back a response, resign in the email body, and you'll receive severance until September. Go somewhere nice, enjoy yourself, you know, have a good life. No legal authority to do this, no constitutional ability to do this, and yet bringing into reality this otherwise very speculative, strange thing that Curtis Yarvin had suggested. What else did he suggest? He suggests that the better model for governance is not democracy, but monarchy, which is something that Hans Hermann Hoppe, the student of Murray Rothbard, also suggests. Again, seems wild, seems outlandish, seems like science fiction, but he uses the example of Dubai. And he says, who's the hero of the political economy globally in the 2000s? The Emirates, Dubai in particular. What is it? It's a hereditary autocracy, clan-based rule, very old-fashioned seeming, combined with tapping into the most cutting-edge spaces of entertainment, real estate, manufacturing, finance. So Elon Musk's own description of himself as techno king of Tesla obviously suggests there is some complementarity there. But the third thing that Yarvin is known for is his idea of so-called patchwork. So he describes also this vision of cracked up legacy nation states governed more like these sort of corporate style enclaves. He uses the idea of SovCorp, so sovereign corporation, meaning what it sounds like, a fusion of private power with public authority so that things are governed along bottom line CEO principles rather than the principle of universal suffrage or one person, one vote representation. And that is, at least for the present moment, I think, not a bad description of the kind of marching orders or animating vision that the United States government is increasingly operating by at the top level. And the Republican foot soldiers and the Democratic opposition have shown no ability to respond in ways that are, putting any brakes on that vision. The Supreme Court by now is tipped completely towards being the enablers for Trump's policies, so they're unlikely to push back consequentially at any of this either. So there, I think we've moved into even a different phase beyond that of kind of the world of the WTO on the one hand, special economic zones on the other one. But now, if you do get a kind of version of private secessionism combined with the remnants of public authority, then we're more in the world of kind of snow crash and neo-reaction than anything.